Wow, very good afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen, joining this session. Please receive a very, very warm welcome from the East Africa Law Society. My name is Gabriel Achaye, and I am honored to kickstart this webinar session that happens to coincide with the Mental Health Awareness Month, which is the month of May. And what a timely discussion it is to have this very wonderful conversation. Now, this afternoon, we are discussing a very important topic, which is burnout in the legal profession, managing stress, sustaining performance, and preventing professional exhaustion. Now, like we all know, burnout is not a weakness of character. It's indeed something different from weakness of character. It could be attributed to a structural failure. And at times when a profession such as ours that demands everything and takes much of our thinking, our life, our thoughts. It rarely looks at the cost of doing all the things that we do as lawyers. And internationally, you've seen studies show that lawyers experience depression, anxiety, and substance misuse at rates that are significantly higher than that of the general population. Now, here in East Africa, we do not yet have that data. I do not know, maybe our esteemed panelists and experts will share the data with us. But what I know as Gabriel Achaye is that we have a loud bang of silence in East Africa when it comes to mental health. And that silence is what we intend to discuss today. That silence is one of the most dangerous symptoms of burnout. Now, not to preempt the discussion, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce our esteemed moderator for this afternoon, my very good friend and colleague, Miss Brownie Abal, who is a principal legal officer at National Water and Sewage Corporation Uganda, where she leads legal advisory functions covering corporate governance, land and property matters, litigation, employment, intellectual property, and alternative dispute resolution, while also managing a debt portfolio exceeding 10 million US dollars. Now, Brownie has been credited with pioneering the digitization of property management systems and establishing legal aid clinics that have improved efficiency and reduced risk within the institution. Now, she's a global award winner. She was recognized in 2024 as a leader in legal services by the Female Founders Initiative Global. And alongside her role as in-house counsel, she's a partner at Noajuna Associated Advocates, a company secretary at Kickstand Technical Services, and she's actively involved in professional legal bodies, including our very own East Africa Law Society and the Uganda Law Society. Now, beyond legal practice, Brownie is a philanthropist and a founder of the Kitabo Book, an NGO that has supported education initiatives impacting millions of children through book donations and advocacy. She also serves as a business leader and a venture capitalist with interest in hospitality and tourism enterprises in Uganda. She is also a recognized young leader, a public speaker, and has received multiple honors, including recognition as a 30 under 30 Ugandan hero, and has participated in leadership programs with institutions such as Harvard University and the Uongozi Leadership Institute. Now, Brownie has a very long and rich portfolio that if I start reading, it could get dark before I finish it. It's at this juncture, Brownie, I would like to hand it over to you. And you have us for the next 2 hours till 4 p.m. So the ball is in your court. And over to you. I hope you're doing well in Kampala and looking forward to a wonderful discussion with you and all our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. You were reading the bio and I was like, is that me? And I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be able to moderate this session, a session led by lawyers. female lawyers and also professionals in the practice of mental health. We believe this is a very informative session and one that is long overdue. And with lawyers being able to harness their potential properly, then they can be able to deliver not only to their clients, but to the East African society as a whole. So today we're going to be joined by distinguished panelists. Our first will have a keynote address by Dr. Eva Setwine. Then we'll have our panelists, Ms. Mariam Babali, Masi Chore, Asmani Saad, and then we'd have discussions in regards to questions from the different participants. Giving our keynote address, we have Dr. Eva Setwine, which is in regards to the theme, Understanding Burnout in High Pressure Professions, Mental Health, Resilience, and Sustainable Practice. The keynote address will establish the broader context of burnout with demanding professional interventions, environments with particular focus on the legal profession and the sustainability of professional well-being. In Dr. Eva Setwine is the Chief Executive Director and founder of International Center for Mental Health and Family Care Limited. Dr. Twine, with her vast experience in mental health, is here to share with us her insights as take us through this session. Without further ado, Dr. Twine.
Thank you so much, Brownie, and good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be a part of this conversation. As I have been introduced, I'm a mental health practitioner, specialized in workplace wellness, but also family therapy. And when I say family therapy, relationships, especially marriage, and then parenting, but also I'm a relationship coach, helping people to manage relationships well and in a healthy way. So once again, thank you so much for inviting me to speak with you this afternoon. I'm going to share my slides, and I'd like you to help me confirm that that you have received them, that you see them. Brownie, I'll depend on you to tell me that I'll speak through these slides. So please help me understand. Just confirm that they are coming out okay and they are moving.
Yes, they are. They are moving and we can see them clearly.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so it's once again, it's an honor for me to speak to professionals on the area that I'm very passionate about, which is mental health. Just in case no one else talks about this, let me just give a little definition of mental health, because it's one of the concepts that is terribly misunderstood. Every time I'm running a session on mental health, I first check with people their understanding of the concept. And it's not unusual to hear people say mental health is actually mental illness. Now, please, from today, I see over 18 participants on this call. I just want to make it very clear that when we talk about mental health, we are actually talking about our ability to manage stress and keep productive. Ability to manage stress and keep productive. Mental health is not mental illness. So I thought I would make that clarity. But I was invited to talk about this, so let me focus on burnout. Understanding burnout in high pressure professions. That's my focus. Now, I just, again, burnout is one of the concepts that probably people may not bring closer to themselves, and they just look at it as an alien concept and say, oh, burnout, it just feels distant. So let me bring it closer. When we say burnout, what are we talking about? When we say burnout, we're talking about physical and mental exhaustion. Is there any person on this call that doesn't understand exhaustion? Is there a person on this call that doesn't understand energy? Please note that energy equals health. Energy equals health. If you could allow me to label this a little more, energy is in three parts. Number one, we have what we call physical energy. Physical energy accounts for only 12% of human energy. Physical, we tend to understand that. But mental energy, which we also call emotional energy, which by the way we also call relational energy, accounts for 80% of human energy. This is what we call the feel-good energy. We are all powered from within. Of course, we also have the thermal energy, which comes from warmth. And by the way, a fourth one, which is electric energy, which powers our nervous system. But I just wanted to focus on the two, which is the physical and mental. Please note that what we call mental energy is what we call relational or emotional energy that I just want to ask people to focus on, to give attention, because we are all powered from within. So when we say we've burnt out, we are talking about burning out of energy. Who doesn't need energy to perform, to keep productive? When we say we've burnt out, we're talking about emotional, we've burnt out of emotional capacity, ability to keep together. You see, because our emotional energy keeps us productive and healthy. That emotional energy, which I just mentioned, which is 80%, when it is lost through irritability, when you feel overwhelmed, you're not healthy. That's why I started with mental health. You're not healthy. When you feel fearful, when you feel overwhelmed and you cannot handle stress, that is not health. So when we say burnout, you've burn out of emotional regulation and emotional capacity to keep stable. When we say we've burnt out, we are talking about loss of motivation and passion, loss of enthusiasm. Please note that intrinsic motivation helps us to be well. It's health as well. Passion, who doesn't need passion? So when we say we've burnt out, we have lost passion, we've lost motivation, we've lost enthusiasm. When we say we've burnt out, we've lost resilience. We have low recovery from setbacks. Who doesn't experience setbacks in life? So when we have a burnout, we've lost resilience. That's what burnout means. And of course, when we say we've burnt out, we've lost hope and we've lost optimism. Who doesn't need hope? Who wants to feel helpless? Who wants to feel trapped? Very important for us to consider these aspects. So this is what we call burnout. Now, we just imagine you have no energy, you have no emotional capacity, you have no passion, you're moving around with no motivation, you have low resilience, everything that comes shoots you down, and then you are helpless and hopeless. That's what we mean by burnout. I thought by bringing this closer, we are able to understand what we are talking about, that burnout is not some alien concept, but it's just here with us, and it's a day-to-day thing. Now, let me just give a few opening reflections for us. Let me bring it home a little more, okay? I just want you to imagine a situation where you have a phone that is constantly used without charging, what happens? Eventually it shuts down. I thought I would illustrate it with a few of these. All of us, I'm very sure that all of us on this call use a phone. And we cannot stand a moment when our phone is out of charge. So just you use it, but you do not charge. That's what we talk about as burnout. Number 2, a car running without servicing. Please note that a car may continue moving even when overdue for service until the engine suddenly drops or fails. That's what we call burnout. Imagine a tree in a drought. A tree without water may remain standing. I'm sure some of you have seen for some time. It can. It gets resilient until it eventually dries out. That's what we call burnout. So you could still be standing, but then you can't tell when you eventually dry out because internally you're drained of what we call emotional or psychic energy. And finally, I thought I would use this illustration of an overloaded backpack. Imagine yourself carrying a backpack and someone keeps adding stones every day. At a certain point, you feel, okay, I can't take it anymore. It's just going to run you down. So I just thought I would share these illustrations so that we can relate, we can connect with the concept of burnout. So the objectives of this session is number 1, to understand what burnout is, which I believe I've explained quite well. But number 2, to explore the physical and mental health implications of burnout. And number 3, to identify causes and warning signs, because sometimes we don't know. We keep going, we say, I'm okay, until you're not okay. Number 4, to learn resilience strategies, resilience building strategies. How can we be resilient in a busy world, in a highly demanding profession like legal, and then of course to promote sustainable professional practice. These are the objectives of this session that we are having this afternoon. Please allow me to just highlight, as I was required to highlight, high pressure professions. High pressure professions are the healing professions, and these are the professions. I'll talk a little bit about the healing professions, but healthcare professionals, doctors, some of us who have relatives or friends that are healthcare professionals, we know what happens. I'm into the marriage ministry, and I know what happens with people who are married to healthcare doctors, nurses, and all. It's not an easy area because they are high pressure. They receive calls at ungodly hours. They are required to show up even when they would rather rest. Healthcare professionals. Number 2, corporate executives, needless to say. And of course, your world, lawyers and judges. And of course, teachers and lecturers that have to teach and then examine and then mark and then, so they are required to show up every time and any time. Humanitarian workers have been one of them. But let me also come to my world, clergy and counselors. As counselors, and I will not hesitate to give examples from my world where you have to, every person that comes to you needs healing and needs it now. And then you also feel compelled, if I don't show up, this person is going to die. These are professions that we call high pressure. But please allow me to also mention to you, these are what we call healing professions. I want you to compare this with engineers that are excavating, I don't know what. It's different. They also do work. It can be high pressure, but healing professions that connect with people direct are what we call high pressure healing professions. And what happens? These professions, there is a high temptation to heal others while you harm yourself. I'm trying to be a little lighter here and not say kill, but harm yourself. But probably you know that ultimately you can actually kill yourself. I'll give you an example. There is a season when during COVID, when I was doing counseling and every organization was reaching out, please talk to our profession, please talk to our staff, please talk to our staff. After talking to staff in a group setting, please, there are individuals that have to come. Oh, this one has also been. To be honest with you, I almost died because I had no time to rest. So there is a high temptation for healing professions or professionals to heal others while harming themselves. And unfortunately, your profession is one of them. Why is burnout on the increase? Why is burnout increasing? Number one, definitely excessive workloads, long working hours, digital overload. I really want to say something more about digital overload. Digital overload, as a psychologist, I'll tell you, the digital world is addictive and requires a lot of discipline. And when we don't have a lot of discipline, we can only keep complaining of how this is too much, but we have nothing to do about it. But it requires a lot of discipline. And so people, after a long day working, then they rest into the digital world to just feel a little good, connect with her, and before they know, it is a problem. Poor work-life balance, this is an area for discussion on its own. Of course, economic pressures, but as I mentioned, characteristic of our world, which is the healing world, is compassion fatigue. There is a temptation to show up anytime because you're trying to feel for the other person, but you're not feeling for yourself. Compassion fatigue. I thought I would also share with you very quickly, ladies and gentlemen, that burnout has warning signs. And most of the time we miss the turns. We don't see. We think it's normal. We actually can glamorize it. You've had people say, I'm so busy. And busy becomes cool. But they don't realize that actually that busy is a warning sign, and there are certain other danger signs that they need to pay attention to. Number one, irritability and anxiety. Now you can cover this up with, oh, me, that's how I talk. But I want you to check when you get horribly irritable, that your children start running away from you, your colleagues are wondering what's going on in your world, people are just on eggshells around you. Irritability is a big warning sign for burnout. Number two, chronic fatigue, where on Monday morning it feels like Friday evening. So you feel, oh, I can't believe after the weekend I still feel like this. That's a major warning sign. Number three, sleep disturbance. Sleep disturbance, every time we are burnt out, the part of our brain responsible for pleasure is affected. Pleasure zone of our brain supplies sleep, supplies sex, supplies appetite. Everything pleasurable comes from there. Now, every time we are burnt out, we are super stressed, then all the brain chemicals run to the emergency zone, and our pleasure zone is deprived. That's why sleep becomes a problem. Now, you can say, I've heard people say, sleep about, average time for this age is 9 hours or 7. You can go to bed and assume you're sleeping, but you're not sleeping. You don't have what we call quality sleep that restores your lost cells, that re-energizes you for the morning. Sleep disturbances. Of course, reduced motivation, I already talked about it. Frequency illness because your immunity is compromised by excessive stress hormones in your body. And definitely, we've also seen in extreme cases, people getting withdrawn and isolated. Why? Because if people hang around in your space being happy and it feels like they are touching a wound on your body. So these are some of the warning signs you need to pay attention to and not make peace with it. Life is busy. So, it's normal to feel fatigue. I will say later on that we don't have spare parts for our bodies. So please watch out for these warning signs. Now, in terms of mental health impact, definitely we've seen some people plunge into depression. You're busy, you're sad, you do not connect with people, you lack human interaction because you're busy at work, you're busy, you don't smile, you don't do what we call life-giving activities. Simple. Please note that life is simple. So every time you get out of the zone of simplicity, you easily can plunge into depression, right? Panic attacks, because sometimes we just keep going until we feel hopeless. And panic attacks come as a result of extreme hopelessness. But also, let me talk about relationship difficulties. Do you know that there are so many people whose partners, there are some of you who are in marriage, for instance, you have no time for your private relationships and you convince yourself, let me work, I'll be okay. By 40, I need to have finished this. Before by the time you turn 40, you have no family to go to. Your children have totally disconnected from you. But let me also talk about those that are not married. Some people, again, in my line of work, I've met young people in a generation that follows me that cannot foster meaningful relationships and date meaningfully to a point of establishing lasting relationships. Relationship difficulties. So many, I've had partners who are asking especially women, my brothers, listen, women who are asking their husbands to put them on their to-do list. At least put the children and myself on your to-do list. We can be the last item. And just imagine you get into that conversation. My brother, Aria Gabriel, talked about substance misuse. Now, every time people get into depression, they've lost pleasure. And so we get desperate to have a little pleasure. That's how some people drink something to feel a little happy. And before you know, they are into substance abuse. And of course, when the worst comes to in severe cases, some people get suicidal. These are some of the effects of burnout, mental health effects of burnout. Again, I don't think anyone wants to associate themselves with this. So I want to ask you, let's pay attention to our bodies. Please note that burnout often hides behind achievement. Oh, I have to be successful. I've always been asking people, if some of you have listened, what is success? Can you define success? What is success? Now, you've heard, again, the world has gone crazy, and be careful who speaks or which perspectives you follow in this world. You've heard like rest is laziness. So there are some people that don't rest at all because rest is laziness. Some of us have fallen into the temptation to be called strong. Strong people don't break down. But I also want to emphasize the issue of peer pressure, especially in your generation. This affects every generation. But your particular generation, by 40, I need to have achieved this. By 40, I need to have my own, by 40. And this comes at the cost of your health. I don't know how many of you are succumbing to this peer pressure. At the same time, I've always told people, I've heard people say by 40, but then they say life begins at 40. So I've always asked, which life ends at 40 and which life begins at 40? Do you succumb to the pressures that you need to achieve something, but at the cost of your health? Please note that hiding behind busy work doesn't help anyone. Never hide behind busy work, busy life. It takes just as much energy to fail as it takes to succeed. I love this quote by O.G. Mandino, because you have to do a few things the wrong way to get burnt out. And I'm going to share a few things. So don't hide behind achievement. There are so many houses, beautiful homes, occupied by miserable people. People that are sick because of burnout. People that have lousy relationships because they have no time to balance their lives. So never hide behind achievement. Achievement, unfortunately, sometimes may not be success, but that's a conversation for the next conference. So I just want to give you a reminder today. Your reminder today is your exhaustion isn't a trophy. Your burnout isn't an achievement. Success that costs your well-being isn't success at all. It's actually failure or survival mode decorated as ambition. Me, I'm ambitious, but that should not come at the cost of your well-being. So exhaustion, once again, is not a badge of honor. You can still achieve some things, but with a well-balanced life. So this is your reminder today. I just want to end it at a point where I share how sustainable professional practice can be achieved. Because until this point, I'm sure some people are asking, so how do we achieve balance? How do we achieve sustainable professional practice? How can I be a good lawyer, but also a good family member? How can I be a good lawyer, but with good health? I don't have to age into disease, what we call lifestyle illnesses. Lifestyle illnesses are not about eating habits, but it's actually broader about how we manage our lives broadly. So let me just share how this can be achieved. Because I remember when I was asked to speak, someone said, are we normalizing it? And I think I've talked about that, but how can we then change and look at it in a more professional way? How can you be a professional, balanced lawyer? Number one, I just wanted to show that at personal level, we have a lot of work to do. What can you do? Number one, healthy workload management. Healthy workload management. We all can have, we have workload. All of us probably have workload, but we need to manage it. We need to manage it in consideration of the fact that life is not about work only. Manage your workload. When I started my professional work, I was coming as a therapist. I was coming from the development world, high level, international level. I had I was earning high in foreign currency, and I decided to cross into my profession. And in my profession, you earn from every person you've met. So there is if you're coming from earning in foreign currency and you come to Uganda and then you're doing this work where you're earning little, counseling, and then some people are asking, do you ask for money or it's just free talking? Now, the temptation is to have as much workload so that you can earn. And I later realized that I was dying. I was earning, but dying. And so I had to say, no, every day I'm not going to go beyond 4 counseling sessions, because by the time I finished 6, I would feel, I would forget my name. So workload, how do you manage your workload? Do you just take in? Is your in tray always full? Please remember that when you drop, your in tray will always have work, so you don't have to finish everything in one day. Number 2, at personal level, delegate. Some of us are not good at delegation. Number 3, structured breaks. Sometimes we think we have to go out, and no, we can actually manage burnout through structured breaks. Just get off your desk, step into another office, talk to someone, say hello, or walk, take a few steps, and you can actually manage burnout. Number 4, annual leave utilization. I want to challenge you. How many of you take your annual leave? And I can hear some people say, some of us who are self-employed, do we have leave? When you're self-employed, it's harder, because I'm self-employed and I know what I'm talking about. You have to be intentional and deliberate about your annual leave utilization. People who came up with the concept of annual leave knew that the body needed to rest. And so, as some of us, when we take annual leave, that's when you have a side hustle to run after. But are you resting? Are you resting? Digital detox practices. I've already talked about the challenge we are having with the digital world and the discipline it requires and our inability to manage. And then please prioritize sleep and rest. And it has to be quality sleep. Let me say something about quality sleep. I'm almost done. Let me say something about quality sleep. Friends, sleep helps to reorganize the brain. Excuse me. If any of you has ever slept and you don't sleep well, you wake up to work, check the confusion you have in the morning. Now, when we sleep, the brain reorganizes work and structures it and compartmentalizes it and helps you to have mental clarity. Sleep also regenerates your brain, especially. It regenerates the entire body, but it regenerates brain cells and of course body cells. Sleep re-energizes us entirely. So please, consider sleep. I've heard people say, may I just sleep for 2 minutes or rather 2 hours and I'm good to go. You can only go for a long time before you break down. And of course, foster healthy relationships. Remember, 80% of our health comes from relationships. And finally, at personal level, seek professional support early. I'll say more as I conclude my submission. At organizational level, wellness policies. When we started this work in the area of wellness, very few organizations had wellness practices, rather policies. And we've worked with a number. Now we've come a long way. And people are saying stress, people, we pay them well. Do they need, what is stress? Now we realize that we need this. So any organization that doesn't have wellness policy, that's a challenge. Number 2, employee assistance programs that we do what we call staff wellness programs. Very important to have these kinds of conversations, but also helping people to get support in a timely manner. Number 3, at organizational level, flexible working arrangements. flexible working arrangements. Again, because of time, I will not say much about this, but we know what it means. Some people are able to work from home and still be effective. Flexibility in whichever way you define it. And of course, mental health training, equipping people with skills to manage stress at their levels. And then, of course, promoting peer support systems within the organization. This can be done and help people to keep healthy and sustain professional practice. I have one or two more things and I will close. I just want to say to us, please don't say yes to serving others. You and I are serving in the area of healing people. Please don't rush to heal others and say yes when you would rather say no. If it means saying no to your wellness, anything that comes at the cost of your wellness is not healthy for you and for me. And I also want to say to you, sometimes it's very hard for you and me in the healing profession to say no and mean it. I want to leave this to you, that no is a complete sentence sometimes. You don't need to give justifications or explanations, long explanations. Sometimes I'm able to say, sorry, I don't work over the weekend. Or I say, they say, Dr. Evers, I only have time over the weekend. I say, Bambi, I also work from Monday to Friday. Then Saturday, Sunday are for rest. So I can't see you. Now, when I had started, I would get tempted to explain a lot. But remember, no is a complete sentence. And you and I have to learn to say no without apology. Call to action. I'll end here. Call to action. I just want to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that the human body is the only machine in this world for which there are no spare parts. If your body breaks down, people will feel sad for a couple of weeks and then they'll forget about it. So if your body breaks down, you probably will be the main loser and a few of your close family members, and the world will move on. So let's stop treating our bodies like we have a spare one in the closet. We need to take care of ourselves and guard against burnout. I just want to remind us, friends, that self-care, while the organization can do so many things, self-care is a professional responsibility. In case you need support from us, you're wondering how you can balance your work and life, you're wondering how you can manage relationships, be a good parent at the same time, be a good professional, be a good husband, as well as be a good professional lawyer, we are available to support you. So my contacts are shared there. Please reach out. And I want to encourage people, please seek help. If you can't manage certain things on your own, that's why we have been trained to support you. I'll stop here and ask for questions and discussions and say thank you so much once again for trusting me to share my thoughts during this important conversation. God bless you.
Bless you, Doctor. Thank you so much for the insights that you have shared with us. Some of the key things is don't say yes to others if it means saying no to your wellness. No is a complete sentence. Those struck me because usually we say no, then we are like, but then you add excuses. So you end up actually doing what you've said no to. Then your call to action of self-care is a professional responsibility. And just reminding us that, yes, we have to be able to do our jobs, but our bodies are more important. If we do not have a healthy body, then we cannot even actually do the work that we're doing. So there's no point in stressing your body, yet after like 2 weeks or so, you'll be maybe forced to have bed rest or be put on sick leave. There's couple of our chief managers who are put on bed rest because they're like, no, you have to just sit and basically do nothing. So this just reminds us that we can only function as well as our body is. Because of the interest of time, we'll not take questions now. We are already at 2:49, so we'll just go dive right into the panel discussions, and then we'll have questions at the end. So we're going into our next panelist, who is the managing partner of Kabuzire Mbabali and Company Advocates, Mariam Mbabali. She is here to talk about the reality of burnout in legal practice, pressure, performance, and professional identity. So looking at members who are in the legal practice, what you should do. What are her key takeaways as someone who has done this for quite some time? Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Miss Mariam Mbabali.
Thank you. Thank you, Brownie. And thank you, everybody who's tuned in. I want to give a special thank you to the East Africa Law Society for always reaching out and creating such a space. I believe is one of the most necessary conversations within our profession today. And thank you so much. Every time I see that phone call, I just hear mental health, legal practice, and I'm like, those are my people. And I'm very happy and honored to be here. So to me, I'll start with a quote by Richard Rohr. He says, what is not transformed is transmuted. And I believe that statement speaks profoundly to the reality of burnout within our legal profession. I'll start by really making us see our profession for what it really is. I mean, it looks like it was built on burnout. It has taught us everything else but managing stress, managing burnout. And imagine we have, I think it's still there at the Law Development Center or in all the other back courses. They teach us ethics and integrity, how we show up, how we have to conduct ourselves with demeanor. And I wish they taught us how to process the emotional weight that comes with constant carrying conflict, urgency, pressure, and responsibility. So to me, the legal profession largely is, I'll compare it with, it's just that uncle, that dad that takes you through law school, but molests you, to say the least, because it takes a lot. It gives, you sit back with an emotional toil at the end of the day. One thing that stands out for me is, first of all, it's to become a lawyer to begin. You must have ticked most of all the boxes from when you were a child. I'll speak for myself. In our times, being a lawyer is something that I believe should be held in high regard. So a lot is expected of us, and how you obtain the points used to be very high just to be a lawyer. You work very hard at it, and finally you make it to the profession. And guess what? No one prepares you. That one, it's very adversarial in nature. You start off your day, I'll speak for myself, as a practicing attorney, you're seated in your chambers, you have all these appointments, but they all belong with a different topic. You've met a client who is discussing a family matter, and you're listening, and you see someone with tears rolling down their face. The husband is, it's a victim of a domestic violence, and you have supposed to listen with a straight face. And half the time, most of what we hear is projection. They are projecting some of the things that are happening in your own life, but you're in now a professional space and you're supposed to take in that information. Then we'll speak about litigation. The way it's all designed, as counsel, you are appearing before a judge. These are your colleagues. It is emotional. You're emotionally charged because you're putting up a good case for your client. And sometimes it's a rape case for those practicing criminal, but you've sat through the evidence of a rape victim. with a straight face and you're cross-examining this witness. You're asking all the personal questions. How did it happen? Are you sure? Are you sure that it wasn't consensual sexual intercourse, for example? And you're supposed to take, you see a witness with a lot of emotions, but you're supposed to hold your ground because that's the side you are on. At the end of the day, you carry the consequence of that prolonged pressure, that emotional toil, and no one prepares you for the emotional recovery. You sit through it, it's trauma, exposure at its best in our legal profession. And at the same time, the profession itself is constant deadlines, constant conflict management. Everything is designed on a timeline. From when you file the case, from when you receive it, so you're working at a clock or around clock. One moment you're aggressively defending your client in court, challenging the opposition counsel intensely. And then on another moment, you're smiling because, these are your colleagues. You're supposed to switch on and switch off at the same time. So a lawyer who once loved their profession, it's very easy for you to be emotionally detached if you're not self-aware, where you feel emotionally triggered. And people will ask, but what happened? That lawyer used to be like this. But they forget that, that passion, if it's not dealt with, it will become a performance in due course. Where you compromise your rest, it will eventually look like guilt. One of the reasons that I believe us lawyers particularly are vulnerable to burnout is because, coupled with all that, the profession attracts high achievers. And then after we are all looped in, there's no solution to how you're supposed to manage your own mental health. That is on you. I believe this is the profession where every law firm should have a check-in with each other. How are we doing mentally? You've just finished a very case that's so triggering. Who is checking in on how you feel? But you're supposed to pack your bags, move in on the next. What's happening on the next? So the environment itself has enabled and hasn't transformed to incorporate mental health at every stage, even in courts, which I believe we are supposed to have the interludes to check in with our mental health. How is everybody doing? But there's nothing like that. And we have normalized operating at a high. Another thing that I want to speak about with our profession is, at the end of the day, we carry secondary, what I would call, we have caregiver syndrome, which is mostly secondary trauma that we get off our clients, our interactions with our colleagues. And I think in our profession, it has got to the height of, I could liken it with the smokers. The other person is smoking, but the one who's getting the secondary smoke could die of cancer before the primary smoker. So I believe as lawyers, it's the same thing. You go back and think of the trauma. I can think of a case I handled. It was a murder case. And the victim was burnt by the wife, and it has never left my head. I'm always very aware of how it left me feeling. This was a couple, and you wonder how did they get there? But no one checks in on the secondary effects it has on us lawyers. So we are on a continuous roller coaster on how the profession left us with holding the stick of the mental health. And sometimes even our clients would say, but I don't think you're understanding my case, because they think you're not emotionally there. And sometimes when you bring yourself in that emotional situation, you're most likely to relate more with your clients, because now you've won the feelings of your clients and they feel you emotionally charged. But the after effects lead to burnout more than ever. And before we know it, you get to a point where like you're constantly having to switch between the emotional intensity and the emotional suppression can become extremely exhausting. And I believe many of us are operating on suppressed emotions. And in order to function professionally, we have had to stop recognizing when we are overwhelmed and when we are achieving. Because just when you're taking off and when your career is there, then you're recognized from, oh, so and so, but it's doing well. So and so, because you've managed to, you've showed up, your profession is recognizing you, but I mean, are you really winning? When your profession is leaving you mentally, you're on crutches. So I believe we carry the battles that are not ours and absorb a lot of emotional consequences for the battles on a daily, and sometimes nobody's checking. I think this should be a policy. This should be something that our different law societies should ensure, that the different law firms and the courtroom demeanor and the way it is all structured gives us a break to emotionally check in with how we are feeling. Or else we always feel that burden that no one offloads you, no one checks in, not even the judge. Recently we had the Okello case, and there's so many opinions from different people. And I was imagining, but give a judge a break. Do you have an idea what she has to sit through? With all this tension, the media coverage, and different conspiracy theories. And again, you have to do your job. So many of our colleagues who are not in legal practice but are serving on the bench also get to suffer the same emotion turmoil, because today it's a different case. Tomorrow you have to log in and log out, and all that suppressed emotions and adversarial intake emotionally, I believe has led to a lot of consequences and a lot of burnouts. One thing I also, if the time allows, I would say one big mistake we are all making is dwelling after an action is completed. We are all talking about it after the fact, and we dubbed it the burnout, the legal profession. I still think we need to sit with the consequences of our decisions. What should we be grateful for? How do we end our days? How do we end our sessions? Even dehumanizing the whole situation. Like, the judge is just supposed to pronounce, this party has gotten cost, the other one has lost. Just losing a case alone, especially not all the time the one who loses had a bad case. But most of the cases cannot be defended because the law is what it is. But half the time, or 70%, something happened and someone was really affected by it. But guess what? The law couldn't back you up, and you're supposed to move on. Pick yourself up and move on. So as counsel, you look at the clients you represent, the victims in the situation, and how the law is designed, the court is designed. Everybody has to pick themselves up and look for solace elsewhere, and how to move beyond what meets the eye. I also would like to bring out the fact that no matter what we do, we all just rush for the next big thing, the next big case. And I think it shouldn't be that. We should find time to sit with ourselves. We should find time to reset. As Doctor has said, we should be at the point of where you set boundaries and say, for this case, I won't take. But it's a hard knock life out there. How many cases are you going to pass on? Sometimes those difficult cases are the cases that are paying you well. But as counsels, I believe we should be in a position of saying, this one will trigger me. I won't do this. Let me put it in a grayscale and measure what can I consume and what can't I consume. So we should be at a point of no, and agreeing with Dr. Evans, we should say no. There should be a boundary of what I can do as a woman, as a lawyer, as someone who represents my background and where I'm from. There are things I shouldn't take as instructions. Then another thing, we are constantly in a stress environment, and I believe our amygdala is always running. It always runs the show of, the fight and flight is always very within us, and with time it becomes part of us. And that tendency to keep working is always something that you're like, oh, you're rewarded at work, you're rewarded. Oh, so and so is hardworking. She's always available to, and meets all the deadlines, but at what cost? So I would call upon our colleagues, all of us here, to find time to ground ourselves, to find time to regulate and put our brains on reset and shut down the noisy world, or the noisy legal world, and tune out. Being a trauma-informed practitioner at the same time, I've learned so much that our brain is like a muscle. We should be able to experiment, to take on the experiment that Dr. mentioned of, if your phone can be turned off 2 hours of sleep, why not your brain? Why can't your brain, even during the day, say that I'm resetting so that it can reboot? How often do we say, let us put our brains on reboot? Just after a session, I just need to put my feet up and not go into another session in the afternoon. How often do we have those policies in our law firms that allow that? And lawyers, we are good at all these policies, but we lack them in our real world. In our law firms, I think lawyers, if I picked on a law firm at random, when is the last time when any of you took leave? You laugh, because lawyers, we are always running on full, and yet mentally we are on empty, because we draw the policies but don't draw them for ourselves. How many law firms have mental health policies, but they have drawn many for corporations and different workplaces, but lack that particular one in their own space? How many of us? So we should stop the tendency of running to the next big thing, the next big case, the next promotion, the more likes, more followers. But no matter how much we do, we should always think of ourselves first, of our mental health first. And I think lately there is a very direct link between stress and now the rampant diseases that are out there, cancer and what have you, unexplainable. I think stress is well up here after all those diseases, and we should stop and ask ourselves, is it all worth it? When do we draw the line? So in our profession, I still want to call upon our policymakers and ourselves, because as lawyers, we are always in the middle, right there when it's all happening. But at the parliament level, there's always a lawyer at the scene, and we think of ourselves last. And it will be a shame that most of us now in our law society emails, we are always now looking at death announcements. But when you go to church and hear the cause of death, it's a mumbo jumbo, and stress is way up there. I think we should prioritize our living, try to transform, just because generations before us did not think of having mental health at the corner of our profession, doesn't mean that we don't have to. We should transform. If we can have an ethics and integrity course unit at the Law Development Center, why don't we have one on how to check with our mental health? That's something I wanted to leave with us and ask ourselves, is it too late to transform? Can't we incorporate it right from school and we put it in our courtrooms? That we need a mental health break. Sometimes you've had evidence, it's just overwhelming. Why can't we transform that? So I believe we should stop glorifying and normalizing these chronic stress environments and change it from becoming a lifestyle, but adopt a lifestyle that incorporates a mental health check. So I want to close my session with, this is a profession that's it's very dear to our hearts. It solves people's problems. It solves our problems. And we believe the mistakes we all make of emotional numbness and emotional emotional, let me call it recklessness, we should transform. Let's transmit for other generations. As we have the status quo of senior lawyer and junior lawyer, let us make it better for those that are coming after us. And this shouldn't be a song that we endlessly drum, but it should be something that we incorporate as a lifestyle. Thank you. I'll move over to you, Brownie, and I'll be able to answer others in our Q&A. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Mariam. You have clearly highlighted the step-by-step process that very many practitioners go through in regards to mental health, looking at your clients' needs, looking at the public's needs, looking at your boss's needs, or you as the managing partner, or you as an associate. How do you respond to your clients' needs? You don't want to put your phone down. We used to joke, we used to travel with a friend, and literally during the travel, you just see her on the laptop the whole time. So it's like, why did you move all the way to this vacation when you're going to be in the laptop? So we even don't know how to detach from work. Even if you're saying, oh, I'm going to relax, or as the doctor said, if you're going on leave, but you're still attached to your work. And mainly also for ladies, where I look at how do I become like you end up feeling more for the client than the client themselves. Sometimes you're even more emotional than the client because you feel the pain, you feel the issues, and then we forget that really this is just work, and there has to be a balance, as you've said. Today it will be a family issue, tomorrow it will be something else. Thank you so much for bringing that to light with the practical examples and sharing your story. Without further ado, we're going to Mercy Cheredicho, which is in regards to from stress to liability, employer duties, and mental health in the workplace. She is an associate advocate at CM Advocates LLP, and she's going to look at how do you foresee mental health related workplace claims becoming more prominent within professional environments in East Africa, and how exposed are employers who consistently ignore warning signs of psychological distress within the workplace. Without further ado, Mercy.
Thank you, Brownie. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be part of this session just because I'm not in the senior level as most of the people on the panel, but still, mental health cuts across all stages of practice. So to answer the question on liability, I'd really like to project because I think liability is best established in law, and I can only show that via my slides. So Brownie, if you can please confirm if you can see them once I project the slides.
No problem. Not yet.
Can you see them?
Yes, we can. You can maybe put it in presentation mode.
Okay, now can you see it?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay. So I'll be handling the session on employer duties in safeguarding mental health. So traditionally, mental health was seen as a personal aspect, such that it wasn't projected to work. And also it was seen as a wellness issue, which is handled on a personal level. But as per what we are dealing with right now, there's judicial precedents and also regulatory developments on how relevant mental health is. So right now, we can see an increase in psychological safety. This is also seen in some of the regulatory guidelines which we have in East Africa. I'll highlight a few of the jurisdictions later on in the presentation. So we've also seen the consequences of not adhering to these psychological safety guidelines, which deals with a failure of accommodating the employees or even workplace management. So the question right now is no longer whether the employer caused the employee's mental decline. Right now, we're looking at the employer. Did the employer know or ought to have known about the risk of the mental health of the employee? And did they act reasonably once they became aware of this risk. This is what you're going to look at. So why does this matter become relevant right now? As Daktari has mentioned, there's an increase in workplace stress, especially now that you're dealing with one of the careers which has a lot of workplace stress, and there's burnout, the psychological complaints. We've seen an increased recognition of psychological injury, which actually results to damages which are given in court. We've seen a broader interpretation of what occupational safety is with regards to mental health. And we've also seen greater judicial scrutiny on employer conduct involving vulnerable employees. I'll explain who the vulnerable employees are. The emerging trend is that whenever there is a mental health dispute with regards to an employee and an employer, there's an increase in unfair termination claims, discrimination disputes, constructive dismissal claims, occupational safety claims. I'm sure most of you know what all of these are. So we need to distinguish between what mental illness is and when liability starts. So we need to know that mental health illness may arise both by work or non-work related factors. So ideally, the mere existence of a mental illness in the workforce itself is not a legal violation. How an employer responds to this mental illness is what may give out the legal injury. So the core principle from this is that an employer ought to be reasonably aware or even ought to be of knowledge of the mental health of the employee. And if the employer fails to respond appropriately, then this may attract legal liability. Let's look at this practical scenario. Maybe as an employer, you have this nice employee. The employee was performing, was putting out the KPIs, was meeting the deadlines, but all of a sudden there's a form of exhaustion, there are panic attacks, there's a deteriorating performance. And as an employee, how do you respond? Like, will you dismiss this employee? Will you choose to put this employee on medical leave? Will you put this employee in disciplinary action? Actually, at this point, how will the employer react? Now, this is the central question on how liability arises. At what point did the employer's legal duty arise? So we look at the legal foundation. Now, the only way you can establish liability is by looking at the law and how the courts have interpreted the law. Currently in East Africa, there's no country which has a specific law on mental health in the workplace. Though there are mental health provisions, there's none which specifically deals with mental health in the workplace. So instead, we have constitutional provisions, employment statutes, OSH obligations, general public health requirements, anti-discrimination principles, and judicial interpretation. I look at 3 countries. Kenya has the most profound regulations on mental health protection in the workplace. We'll start basically with the Supreme Court law of the country. This will be the Constitution of Kenya, and Article 28, which deals with human dignity, Article 41, which deals with fair labor practices, 27, which deals with non-discrimination, 43, on the highest attainable standard of health. Also, the Employment Act also prohibits discrimination. The OSH also provides that the general duty of an employer is to provide a safe working environment for an employee. When you're looking at the definition of a safe working environment, interpretations of this term have included the term mental health. You can look at other international organization instruments to expound on the meaning of a safe working environment. Then we have the Mental Health Act, which also prohibits discrimination. So to note, Kenya has a national guideline on workplace mental wellness, which was published by the Ministry of Health in 2023 to provide a framework of promotion, prevention, and care of mental health of the employees. So the next will be Uganda. The same thing, the Constitution of Uganda provides for the same. The OSH Act, of importance is in Uganda, the OSH Act specifically mentions the mental elements of an employee as one of the things which fall within the perspective of health. So in verbatim, health in relation to work means not merely the absence of diseases or infirmity. It includes the physical and mental elements affecting health, which are indirectly or directly related to safety and hygiene of work. So these are the same provisions provided in the Employment Act and the Mental Health Act, which prohibit discrimination. This is also mirrored in Rwanda, which whereby the constitution prohibits discrimination. Law number 66 of 2018 also prohibits discrimination. And also there's a mental health policy in Rwanda, which is also effective and mainstreams the mental health in general health services, which includes mental health. So when you're looking at whatever regulatory framework you're looking at, clearly we can see that mental health is somewhat mentioned and it relates to the workplace. Now let's move to the case laws. The first case law I'd look at for the people who practice at the Law Society, who are under the Law Society of Kenya, I'm sure you're aware of this case, the AWW versus CBK case. So in this case, the claimant instituted a suit on behalf of the daughter. So the daughter had a disorder, a mental disorder, but was subjected to disciplinary proceedings because of not performing in work. Now, the problem was, in this case, the CBK did not accommodate the claimant in this case, in the proceedings, and even in the culmination of employment. So the court found that the respondent failed to accommodate the employee's condition and treated her in a discriminatory manner. That is how liability is established. The second case will be the KDF case. This case, I'm told, is subject to appeal, but still, the respondent was also a KDF officer, and he sustained injuries with regards to his mental health due to service, but then he was subjected to disciplinary proceedings based on the mental condition which he had, which made him lag in his work. But then the court established that the employees must provide reasonable adjustments for employees with mental health conditions, as failure to do so breaches fair labor practices. We can see that the amounts which are awarded in such cases are very substantial. With the Etiang case, it was 25 million, and with the AWW case, it was 5 million. I'd like to strike a comparison with the South African case. It's a recent case. So in this case, the employee was subjected to psychological harm. Because of the psychological harm, the employee resigned, and this was deemed as constructive dismissal due to the psychological issues which the employee underwent. And it was emphasized that employers must act fairly and reasonably when workplace conflict or psychological vulnerability becomes apparent, and that mental health considerations are relevant in determining whether continued employment was reasonably possible. So when you're looking at the case laws, there are three factors which are established from all the case laws and from the regulatory provisions which we've just read out. I decipher this. So the first will be foreseeability. The employer ought to know of the mental health risk which the employee is undergoing. This may be seen in various aspects. Daktari mentioned something about burnout, and how burnout is as a result of the low energy or even loss of motivation. These are the practical indicators of what the mental health risk would be. Will there be written complaints? Are there medical notes in place? The second will be the breach of duty. Once an employer establishes that there's a mental health risk, and there's no investigation that happens, no adjustments, no referral, or even punitive discipline is is implemented. Obviously, when a punitive discipline notice is implemented, there'll be legal harm. The legal harm comes in the form of unfair termination, discrimination claims, breach of constitutional dignity, or even psychological trauma, which translates to damages. So when you are putting these three aspects into the case law which you've just handled, let's start with Etiang. In Etiang, the KDF knew about the employee's mental health condition and failed to accommodate him. But then they proceeded with the disciplinary action, and the harm was cruel and inhuman treatment. Here, liability was established. Let's look at also the AWW case. So the employer also knew of the medical reports, failed to accommodate the employee, which is a breach, and the harm was indirect discrimination and unfair termination. This also amounts to liability, and that is how liability is established. So for employers, liability establishes on threefold. It must be, the mental health risk must be foreseeable, there must be a breach of duty, and that there must be legal harm by the conduct of the employer. It's important to note the constructive dismissal bit of mental health, just because I deem it to be very pertinent to the discussion. Like the conduct of an employer can amount to constructive dismissal. Maybe we'd like to define what constructive dismissal is. So constructive dismissal occurs when an employee resigns, but the resignation is not truly voluntary. So in this case, the employer has created or allowed intolerable working conditions that force the employee to leave. In this case, courts increasingly recognize that unmanaged psychological harm may create an intolerable working condition, which may be sufficient ground for constructive dismissal. When you're looking at the vulnerable group, there's an increase in judicial scrutiny on this vulnerable group. This may be people who are going through pregnancy, people who are on medical leave, people who have non-psychiatric treatment, people who have vulnerable periods following disclosures, or even people who are going through disciplinary proceedings involving psychologically vulnerable employees. There's a common case which was cited in Kenya. It's Koskei versus Brand Life Kenya, whereby the court associated disciplinary actions during maternity leave with anguish and psychological harm, warranting compensation. I hope I'm still clear. Okay. Now let's move to the practical compliance considerations for employers. So for any employer who's on call, when you have an employee who has a mental health risk, the first thing will be to record and investigate the mental health complaint. Burnout, we've already seen, is seen from the observable decline on the output. Also, when you have a lot of complaints, ideally, all of this should be recorded and investigated. The second would be to obtain an independent medical assessment. So the only way to ascertain that there's a mental health risk is if you get expert opinion. Medical issues are not ascertained by word of mouth. They are not ascertained informally. It's only ascertained by a medical health assessment, which culminates in a medical report. So it's also important to note that mental health does not equate to mental incapacity. So automatically, just because an employee is dealing with a mental health issue does not mean that they're incapable of performing their duties. The third will be to implement reasonable accommodations. This will be flexible hours, work from home, where it's allowable. I understand most places don't, especially in the legal profession. The fourth will be to adopt and maintain a written work policy mental health program. Daktari had mentioned this. So you should include confidential referral pathways, taking out mental health consultation as part of the insurance package, or even implementing an EAP and documented grievance mechanism. So whenever there's a claim of discrimination or any other sort of mental health risk, which has to be ascertained by law, the first defense will be there was a failure to use an internal mechanism to defeat such a claim, which may be brought forth. So in conclusion, so when we talk about, I think there's one more slide. So the emerging risks and liability trends when we're dealing with the liability of employers. We have teleworking. When you're looking at teleworking, there's a blood line between when work starts and stops. So the always on culture culminates some sort of a burnout associated with the same. So it's always hard to determine the liability also, just because the setting is different from what is traditionally provided for and what is traditionally taking place. The second will be flexible and hybrid work. Isolation in the sense that there's no community. In work, especially when you're dealing with colleagues who are nice in a way, there's always some sort of support. So the lack of support or community when you're dealing with hybrid work may culminate in a mental health risk. The third will be possible abuse of mental health claims. In a way, it may cause issues, especially when we have organizations that do not have an ascertainable structure of how to deal with mental health. And where mental health is cited during disciplinary proceedings or in any other place where it's used to get unjustified sick leave, it may be improbable to ascertain the same unless we get a medical report. So the East African jurisprudence as of now is developing in these areas. However, we can borrow from the international trends so that we may grow our jurisprudence, and also the international trends suggest that there's a future expansion of employer obligations in perspects to mental health. So in conclusion, so the emerging jurisprudence which we have right now in East Africa sends a clear message. Courts are increasingly treating psychological safety as a core employer obligation. We've seen this from the case laws and also the regulatory provisions. So the greatest legal exposure increases when there's a failure to respond to the risks which are there. And the risk most of the time are foreseeable. You can see them from the conduct of the employee. You can see them from the KPIs. You can see them even from the way they relate to their colleagues. So it's the best way to show that your employee is running through burnout or is running through a mental health risk. And the best way to respond is to culminate a program which will basically deal with them. In the worst case scenario and the worst place you can put your organization in is to put a person who's going through such a challenge in a disciplinary action, because that will automatically culminate to something like constructive dismissal or unfair termination or even discriminatory claims. So, Brownie, I think that's it for me. I hope I was within the timeline.
Much mercy. Thank you for the presentation. I think you've given the employers a lot to think about in regards to how do they terminate employment with various employees, especially those going through mental health. What are the best options? Automatic dismissal may not be one of them. They can maybe look into getting counselors and all these things before they reach that final stage to prevent lawsuits. Finally, we'll have our last panelist, Ms. Asmahani Saad, who is a partner at Ketia, Uganda. We'll be looking at beyond the individual, institutional responsibility in preventing burnout. She'll be discussing with us questions in regards to, can the profession realistically address burnout without fundamentally rethinking how success is measured in legal practice? What institutional reform do you believe the profession has delayed for too long? Without further ado, Ms. Asmahani Saad. Thank you.
Thank you, Brownie. Good afternoon, members of the East Africa Law Society. I hope you can hear me. Brownie, please confirm.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much to ELS, Gabriel and your team for this opportunity to be part of this panel and very, very important and transformative discussion. I hope after this that many of us on call will take some time to reflect and be able to apply some of these things we're saying. Thank you to the panelists and thank you to Doctor. I follow you on your socials, so I've picked a lot of tips from you in regards to mental health. So thank you so much, Doctor. Mine is, I think a lot has been said, and I really, really agree with all the panelists have shared. One thing I've picked from Doctor's keynote, and it's something I had never actually conceptualized, that our profession is a healing profession. I think for me that stood out for me, and I actually wrote it down and circled in my book, in my notebook here, and I was just like, yes, it is. And fortunately, and unfortunately, when we're in these professions that we're in, healing professions, a lot is taken from us. And as she was talking, it got me reflecting. And also the question that I was given to talk about, that can the profession realistically address burnout without thinking how success is measured? I remember being, trying to even fathom or perceive being a lawyer, some of the things that I was attracted to being a lawyer then, as maybe in secondary school, was just seeing success, success around you, people driving nice cars, people speaking eloquently, society, just honoring people, just the respect that judges carry. And for me, that was being a lawyer, there was that aura of, how can I say it? There was just that aura of societal applause, the economic applause that surrounded, the profession, that it was so attractive. And then on the other hand, of course, the things that should be core in terms of why we would want to do something, things like purpose, things like your giftings, your talents, those things no one tells us. So you find that even as you chase this profession and your dreams, the core, the internal, and Doctor talked about this, 80% of our, she was talking about burnout or energy, 80% of the energy we carry as humans, it's internal. But we are in a system where we are kind of taught the reversal, that 80% will be the external, whereas that what is internal doesn't matter. So for me, that's just the background and that foundation that we have laid at the start of this conversation is really, really important. And throughout my experience as I've navigated this profession, I have learned that the inward approach in doing law is very important. And this is something that is not taught in school, in law school. At LDC, what was pumped into us, first of all, just even receiving that knowledge of practice at LDC was, everyone will give you their version of LDC. For me, it was a nightmare. You have so much to do in such a short period, so much knowledge to consume, so much pressure. And meanwhile, they're telling you that we are training you for the legal world. So you come out of LDC and everything you're sensing, you've numbed yourself out of actual emotional, just that emotional connection to even what you want to do. And then we go into the survival culture. All you want to do is survive in this culture, is be successful. And when you get into practice, the success measure looks like, for those who practice in Uganda, there was this phenomenon of lawyers and Benzes. So you see the lawyer who's driving Mercedes Benz, and yes, they're successful. Billable hours, people are talking about, this lawyer has billed this much, this one is getting, I don't know how many billion of shillings. Courtroom visibility, lawyers go, and I remember in law school, they used to say a good lawyer is not the one who knows the law, but the one who argues the most. So you go and you just want that visibility, your clients, everyone in court, is just out there to upload you, and they're like, this guy, this lawyer can really argue his case. Long working hours, that was success. You pass by lawyers, you find their lights on, people are still in office, 8, 9, 10, and everyone is just applauding and saying, man, those are hardworking lawyers. Aggressive competition. To an extent that people, in as much as we are colleagues, we get into court and literally people want to tear themselves apart. And that is also celebrated. The hierarchies that we give to ourselves in our practice, senior lawyer, the kind of honor we give to the judges, regardless of, the other side of what you hear or what they're doing. And so the success becomes so, how can I say it? It's so unrealistic. It's a painted picture that leaves us so numb to the reality of what we should be generally as human beings first, but also people who are using law as a means of, just doing a profession, serving, doing what you love. And most times you find people are doing law for survival. And maybe it's not even about, this is my passion, this is what I want to do. And even if it's their passion, they wouldn't really go into an area where they feel that this is best where I can serve. Maybe let me go into advocacy, maybe let me do NGO. No, I will stick to this side because this is where all the glam and all the rewards and all the honor and all the visibility will happen. And really, that's the reality of where we are. But I believe that for starters, normalizing the conversation around mental health. Here in Uganda, I remember could have been a few years ago, maybe 5 or so, there was this call out for a benevolent fund in ULS. And I know East Africa, many law societies eventually started that fund. And it was just a cry out, a responsibility for the profession. We had a couple of deaths, or most of advocates at that time, getting, falling sick, and most of it was stress related. Like Mariam said, some of these diseases, cancer, and so on and so forth, which now research has linked those two to mismanagement of stress. And lawyers, people didn't even have money to manage their own health at that point. And there was a call out on us starting these funds to see that we cater for medical emergencies, we cater for, different things, supporting the families of those who are born, burial, and so on and so forth. And it came from, a place of having assessed the reality of what was happening. Some of these lawyers, may their souls rest in peace, where they were operating on this side of success, driving good cars and all these things, and to everyone, they were okay. But on the other side, the reality of life, they were just breaking down. And no one could even fathom. Everyone looked at them and okay. So the benevolent fund conversation came. And for me, I think for every law society here and East Africa Law Society, we already have some milestones that we can capitalize on. Normalizing these conversations, for me, I think is very important. But also more out of the professional bodies itself, looking at lawyer at the legal profession at a large scale. We also need to go back to ourselves. Because mental health and the conversation we're having here, but also the subjectivity of it moving forward, it's really a transformative agenda. The culture, how we've been nurtured into practicing law, is really survival. And this, I could take it back to even the colonial times when this kind of law was introduced to us. This was something foreign, laws were introduced. People who came long before us had to really catch up, because this was colonial laws. Our own local laws that we were running here in Uganda, traditionally the kingdoms and what, they didn't need that much stress. Things were so simple. You have to settle a dispute, call this person, mediation, alternative dispute resolution. Things were so simple. And then we had a push forward for the reasons that the colonialists had. And now this culture was empowered. This is how this culture started. The people who had to represent, members of society through these kinds of laws that were being introduced had to really catch up. This was something foreign, and it slowly was inculcated into how law was practiced. The pumping of all this legal education, the many years in law school, trying to keep up and benchmark with English laws, I don't know, all these precedents that we have to benchmark on, that became the culture. But if you go back and look at where it started from, it is very foreign. And so, yes, here we are almost a century later or plus, and this is what we have now. So it is going to take, that's what I'm saying, it's a transformative reality. It's not going to be a one-day job. This is something that out of the institution, and the institutions already said there are things already that are being done, but we just need to have more conversations, more awareness, normalizing mental health, people actually coming out and saying openly that I have gone through depression as a lawyer, I have gone through this thing and it's normal. And we can be empathetic and know that that has nothing to do with their excellent service in the legal profession, but they're just being human. And for me, again, the transformation also starts with, even before people choose to do law. I like how Mariam said it. You have a group of people who are high achievers, Most of us who got into law school, I mean, we were really creme de la creme. You hit your A levels, you have 20s, 30s, you've gone, 20 and 25 in our time. And I know even up to now, the law schools will pick the creme de la creme. So you bring all these high achievers together, and then now you want to make them compete, amongst each other. It's very, very unrealistic. And so we need to rethink those things. But for me, my core message every time I speak I get platforms like this, is that we have to go back to ourselves first. Transformation cannot start without you looking at yourself. The inward, that 80%, the energy we need. Are you sure that this is what you want to do? It's a good question to ask ourselves. If law is what I want to do, what am I passionate about in law? Why law? Is this part of my purpose in life? There are some basic things that we have missed. I started a purpose journey maybe 5 or 7 years ago, but I can tell you before that, I was just surviving like anyone else. I was doing this profession. I was being glorified in spaces. She's a lawyer in my family, or she's the first female lawyer in the family. There were good things to hear. But at the end of the day, the biggest need that any individual has in life is to ask themselves, is this really why? Is this my why? Is this what I want to do? And if it's what you want to do, the law is not the end all and be all of your purpose. It's just an enabler. You use it as a platform to do the things you love to do. And that then gets to change the mindset around success. If I am doing what I love to do, if I'm serving humanity with law, if I am representing my clients out of compassion, out of passion, then it ceases to be about competition, about who is the best, about this and that. I come out, I serve out of who I am, not the standards that have been set around me. Now, this is very core. So that kind of transformation, I talk to a lot of young lawyers in my mentorship sessions, and I've come to realize that that's the biggest gap. And if we start closing such gaps and making law or preaching that law is not your end all and be all, it's a tool. It's a tool of service. It's a tool for you to create impact in the world. So how does that fit into what you're doing? That is very important. So with that, I believe that as more and more professions join the legal fraternity, the backup of the institutions, the mindset change that we're driving. Also now, when we come together and we form perhaps like law firms, because in practice, we'll not the different ways we do practice our law. Some people in corporate organizations, some people in NGOs, some people in government, some people in law firms like where we are. When you have had that awareness, then it's easy to do and not to just say. I think it was Mariam who shared and said that as lawyers, we sit down and do these policies for our clients. But do we sit back and say, okay, I'm also in a corporate organization. I'm in a business. I'm employing people. Human beings are my biggest resource. This is capital for me. It's human capital. It's a resource. How do I manage this resource? Wellness is at the core of any human management. So are you putting it in practice or are you just saying? So that for me culminates into what then builds up a strong profession, but also we can be able now to have different measures of success. And also I think there are things, like I keep saying, from my understanding of a lot of things that we do, I always question things. I've always been someone who questions things. And for all those who know me, I don't do law the usual way. I've allowed myself to do law and do other things that I love to do. Why? The measure of success, it is not singular. Because as human beings, we are all unique. We are all different. We are all created with different capabilities. It is our uniqueness that defines our success. Now, when you come into a profession where there's certain set standards, casting stones, how success will look like, already you're going to fail from the start. Because how I measure my success as Mahani here might be different as how Mariam measures her success. And so when you put us together and try to force and create this framework in which, okay, for a successful lawyer, how many cases have you argued? I don't know how many of these things. Are you visible? Are you this? That is already a flawed system. So just to cut the presentation short because of time. The next question I was asked to talk about was institutional reforms. I think I've talked about some of what has been happening here and there, the benevolent fund. I think, not that I think, but what I would push for is we all have all different societies here. We have our Advocates Act, which is good. And we've had a lot of regulations coming. I think, or for me, a low-hanging fruit is where we look at the advocate's professional conduct. I think there's room for an extension of some of that conduct to include mental health, to include wellness, to include check-ins, yeah? And this could be not so much perhaps at an individual level, because part of our conduct is we're expected to practice ethically, to have integrity, to have fairness, And these things we are taught from school. We are taught how to measure them. What should you do? What should you not do? Confidentiality, etc., etc. Why not have these things embedded in there and say, as an advocate, it is expected that you need to check in on your mental well-being. You need to have a balanced life. Yes, this is our profession, but remember, we are the same people. For some of us who are mothers, we are the same people who we don't just have work. We need to juggle. You are a wife, you're a mother, you are a partner in a law firm, you are a sibling. Some of us who have aging parents, you're taking care of your parents, you're taking care of everyone. You have other businesses or other things you're doing. You have other passions you want to do. I personally have a lot of things that I love to do. You're balancing things around you. Is it so bad for a profession to realize that as a human being, we are not one size fits all? We are multifaceted. And so the one person that you're expecting to come and be the best lawyer and be the best everything is the same person where the other demands that are being made on them as they run life. I mean, I want to be the best mom. I want my children to say that was the best mom we ever had. I want the people in my law firm to say that is the best employer we've ever had. This is just human nature, but are we positioning ourselves to do that? So I will end with this, and from everything that we have had today, my call to action is very simple. I think, like I said at the beginning, any mental wellness or mental health conversation, for me, I always take it as transformative. I didn't have much time to tell you about my story. I just wanted to share a clip of it. I went through a time of depression in my life during COVID. And it was not really depression, I must say. It was post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And it was really out of too much stress, failure to handle what was happening during COVID, and then that expectation of I have to keep performing, clients are calling you. So I just broke down, like what Dr. was sharing. Out of that, I got to understand the importance of mental wellness. And since then to date, my life has not been the same. And so if you're here and things like this have not happened to you, but you have a platform like this where we are saying that this is very, very important and core to how you're going to practice and lead a very healthy and balanced life, we need to take it seriously. We need to know that it's time for transformation. It is time for us to normalize this conversation. But most importantly, is to know that as we do our legal profession, we need to connect it with who we are. And that's the only way we can serve with passion, have these boundaries, because you're connecting this to everything around you and not just looking at, doing law as your end all and be all. Brownie, allow me to end it here. Our time is fast spent. Thank you so much, everyone, for hearing me out, and I look forward to any questions that you have. Thank you, Baba.
Thank you so much, Asmani. Your thoughts were very imperative. Thank you for sharing your brief story with us in regards to how mental health actually affected you during COVID. Thank you for highlighting the reforms for all the members. The Benevolent Fund was set up just for you. So ensure that you are a member, you have joined in the different societies across East Africa. It is very paramount because your health is very paramount to your well-being and also to your career growth. As we wind up, we have a question for Doctor. Doctor, please talk about how us as lawyers can handle negative outcomes in our cases, and also how to handle the guilt that comes from mistakes at the workplace caused by excessive workload and burnouts. I think Doctor can handle that, and then we will have the parting shots from the different speakers. I do not see any other questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, members, once again, and thank you for that question, Mercy. Talking about how lawyers can have negative outcomes in our cases. Look, we all fail. I've always told people that it's very easy to receive success, but managing failure is a human challenge. And so all of us in our respective professions, we fail. Or in life, we fail. We call it falling and getting up. But there is a concept we call a growth mindset. every time we fall or we fail, we need to learn from our experiences and say, why did I fail? What could I have done better? So that always helps us because we can never prevent failure. I mean, look at our politicians. They just went through a whole process. You'll see some of them cry. You'll hear some of them collapse. Look at soccer. I love soccer. Every time you watch soccer, you'll always know that there will be a winner at a certain point. I've been a part of the court processes. I've had cases in court. And fortunately, we've succeeded on all that we have had in the courts of law. But every time you win, you have to know that there is a team that fails. So failure, normalizing failure, knowing that it happens, that every time you're working against another team, you or the other team will fail. So normalizing failure, but also most importantly, using failure as a step up, as something that helps us to improve. We are always on a journey of life improvement or self-improvement. So at no point can we assume that we know everything. So you, in your practice as lawyers, you have to know that a negative outcome is normal, but when it happens, how do you manage it? So using failure as a growth mindset. But finally, getting help. Now, we don't have experts on failure management. We don't have experts on pain management. That's why professionals have been trained like us to help you navigate some of the challenges you have. The guilt. Guilt is a very strong emotion that if you're not careful, it can impair you. It can demoralize you. It can demotivate you. And you say, I'll never get into this again. So use professional help. That's why we are here to support you. So I hope that helps to answer the question, Brownie. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Your parting shots. Then we'll move to the rest.
Okay, my parting shots once again is to request people to be mindful about what we are achieving at the cost of wellness. Let's be in the habit of defining success broadly or achievement broadly. Let's not achieve material and a name or things that the world outside of us consume, pleasing the entire world except or but yourself. So anything that comes at the cost of your wellness in terms of draining you, losing energy, losing zeal, losing enthusiasm, losing hope, that's not worth pursuing. We need to be a people that can balance, can have a balanced life, because at the end of the day, what shall it benefit us if you thrive and everyone calls you successful but yourself? Those are my parting shots. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Mariam?
Thank you once again, the East Africa Law Society. I'm so honored to be speaking to you this afternoon. Such a great honor. My parting shots is to encourage every lawyer, wherever you are, especially practicing lawyers, is to develop their own mantra towards mental health, to be each person's keeper. Whether you're the managing partner of the firm or colleague on colleague, check in with each other. Check in with each other and develop key things as a firm or as colleagues, that as a tradition, that you have to know how is so-and-so doing. Though you've been handling such a case, how is it? So that you are able to reset as colleagues, you're able to always be mindful of, I haven't had someone 2 days, you should be giving them a call and check in with each other. And more personal is to establish personal boundaries with both our colleagues, our friends, who have boundaries with each other, and be able to check in with our own boundaries. Are they still working? Have I bent them a little? And last but not least, to adopt a gray surface on our phones. It's something I've learned that I don't keep my phone very bright. That way, I don't get to check what other people are doing. I limit my time on the phone because it's not attractive anyways. So a grayscale is one of those ways that helps you to be in check. There are so many distractions. The phone and social media should be the last thing on your mind. Because these days as lawyers, we have so much pressures. We have our clients recording us. We have sessions being recorded and even meetings. So if you're gonna check in with what they're saying about you, that's enough mental health. So those are my parting shots, and I wish everybody well. Thank you for tuning in and for listening to us. Thank you everyone tuning in wherever you are in East Africa. Thank you, and over to you, Brownie.
Thank you so much, Murthy.
Hi again, everyone. I think my biggest takeaway from this as we leave this conversation is perhaps the most important thing to remember is that exhaustion is not a trophy. Daktari said this. So constant burnout, the stress, the emotional fatigue or whatnot should not be treated like a form of a sign of dedication or success. So a healthy work experience or even workplace is built on having like a system of colleagues who actually know and understand the troubles and tribulations of your job. I cannot stress the importance of having a community. And also healthy workplaces are not built on survival mode. So there has to be a balance between respect, support, and recognizing that people perform best when they are optimal. And when you're only at your optimal, when your well-being is protected. Thank you, Brani. I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Mercy. And finally, Ms. Asmahani.
Yeah, thank you, Brownie. Just to also share my gratitude to the East Africa Law Society and all of those who have tuned in. Thank you so much. My parting shot is, we need to move from the survival culture that we found in this profession and build our own culture, which is to thrive. We need to thrive regardless of the situations that are around us. And for me, like I shared from my experience, one of the things I taught myself is to learn to nurture myself from inward, I went through a lot of self-discovery, which helped me really understand who I am, why I'm doing law, what else can I do with myself, what are my passions. It also took me through an actual wellness journey. I learned to take care of myself. I look at myself not just as an individual, but there is a self inside there that also needs attention. So do self-care, go out, celebrate yourself, regardless whether, and I mean celebrate even when you lose. People always tell you go and celebrate when you win. But when you lose, like what Doctor said, make it a culture. Take out this time, sit with yourself, go have something, ice cream tea with friends and say, okay, this didn't go that way, but what could have gone better? And do your assessment, but in a more positive and a healthy environment. I do take self-retreats, and I've talked about it a lot on my socials, and I really talk to people about it. Take time to be with yourself, with your thoughts, and just learn to love yourself. Like Doctor said, this is an inner energy thing. It's an inner battle. You can only give what you have, and things will always get into you because you allow them to, because you have not protected yourself inwardly. And exercise, find things that you can do to distress. Lawyers, we don't like to exercise. Please exercise. Take a walk, find, things that you can do. For me, exercise transformed my well-being completely. Because yes, I can't say that there are moments where I'm not stressed. Sometimes I have very high transactional work. I get so stressed, I get so worked up. But I know at the end of the day, I will go and give my 1 hour and distress. And by the time I'm done, I feel I'm mentally well. The endorphins and all these things the body needs to self-check and self-regulate. Lastly is purpose. Guys, please, just try to understand your purpose. Even as you do law, find your purpose within law. And in there, everything will come off as given. You're walking this journey that regardless of everything that's happening around us, it's something that you appreciate and it's something that you enjoy doing. So that's it, Brownie. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for your time here. How about you, Brownie?
Thank you so much, Asmahani. Thank you, members, for tuning in. It's 4:09. I would like to take this back to Gabriel. Thank you, to close the session.
Thank you so much, Brownie, for that very wonderfully moderated session. It's indeed been very eye-catching and opening for some of us who were taking mental health uh, as something to play with. But on behalf of the East Africa Law Society, I would like to express our profound gratitude to Dr. Evas Atwine for making time for us and accepting to be a part of this session, and for delivering a masterclass at the very beginning of this session. Dr. Evers, we were inspired, and I was chatting with a colleague and hoping that we could have more of you. And in the word of Oliver Twist, Doctor, if we come knocking at your door asking for some more, please, we hope that we will be able to get you. We have different platforms where we engage with different thematic areas of professionals. So we hope to have more and more of you. Thank you so much for delivering that very wonderful masterpiece. A special thanks to you also, Mariam, for that very wonderful, wonderful presentation. You set the ball rolling and brought us to the realities of burnout. And we really hope that we can continue engaging and building this portfolio of burnout and mental health in our profession. Also to you, Miss Mercy, for your very wonderful submission. We hope to engage with you more and more. And of course, to you, Asmahani, thank you for always making time for and accepting to be a part of our sessions. Now, thank you also for sharing your very wonderful story. For those of you who have not yet read Asmahani's book titled Identity Lost in History, Found in Purpose, which was released last year in December, I pray that you get to read this very beautiful autobiography guide on her beautiful journey, and you'll really be inspired on the journey that she has made. And perhaps you can pick some lessons from there. But thank you so much, Asmahani, for always inspiring generations to get on their feet. All of you have been very exceptional leaders who have given us your expertise, your honesty, most importantly, and your time. So I want to thank you all and thank every participant who has joined us today from across the region. The size of the audience really tells me something very important, that we are ready as a profession to take this conversation forward. And readiness, friends, is the beginning of change. So as the East Africa Law Society, we wish to create safe spaces where we can freely discuss these issues and come up with policies that can be used to improve mental health in the legal profession, but also to drastically reduce instances of burnout in the legal profession. So I'd like to thank you all, and I would like to bring it to a close right now. A recording of this session will be shared alongside the presentation by the panelists, which we hope we will deliver in due course by the close of this week. And we wish you all a very lovely day ahead. Until we meet again next week, you stay blessed, and we'll meet you next week. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.